take a look at this fairy house. What kind of things do you see?
Would you like to see me blow all of this fluff?
Should I knock on the door?
Did she finally get to see fairies? Welcome to Story Time. I'm Tarneshia Evans, a children's program developer here at Ginter Botanical Garden. Before I start Story Time today, I want to tell you about where I am here in the garden. I am on our wonderful tree trail, and we like to call this our woods. It's one of my favorite places. My friend Beth asked me that recently, and this is one of my favorite places in the garden. So I'm gonna ask you a question before I start the story, okay? Have you ever made a fairy house in your backyard or in the woods? Well, if you haven't, I hope you will be inspired to do that after you hear our story today. Fairy houses, written and illustrated by Tracy Kane. And she illustrated the story. That means she made the pictures. And she's the author, and that means she wrote all the words. So, let's go ahead and follow Kristen. This is Kristen, the girl in the story, on her exploration of fairy houses. This summer, my parents decided we should leave the city and spend a week on a small island off the coast of Maine. They said there was something special for me on the island, something I would really like, but they wouldn't tell me what it was until we got there. As soon as we got off the boat, I tried to guess, is it the lighthouse? Those silly sandpipers on the beach? Or our cottage? Later we went for a walk in the woods by our cottage. I discovered the secret my parents had been keeping. What do you think the secret was? Let's find out. Fairy houses! People have built small houses for fairies to live in. There was a sign hanging on the tree. Can I read it to you? Should I read it? You may build houses, small and hidden, for the fairies, but please do not use living or artificial materials. That was the rule. See all the fairy houses? I have a surprise for you later. We may see some fairy houses of our own. I asked if I could build a fairy house. My dad said yes, as long as you follow the rules of the woods. What were the rules again? You may build houses, small and hidden, for the fairies, but please do not use living or artificial materials. I scouted out places that would be just right for a fairy house. I chose a hollow at the base of an oak tree and collected some twigs, some leaves, and pieces of bark to build with. I finished the inside with a floor of dry grass and made a roof with falling leaves. I hoped the fairies would choose my house for a place to live in. The next morning, I couldn't wait to visit the woods again to see if anyone might be sleeping inside my house. When I bent down to look, I heard chirping. Was it fairies snoring? What do you think's inside Kristen's fairy house? The clue was chirping. What do you think it was? Or what do you think it is? Hey, you're not a fairy, I said. You're a cricket. The cricket hopped off into a bush of bright red berries. Maybe the fairies would eat some, I thought. I gathered a handful of berries from the ground and sprinkled them around my house. The following day, after visiting the lighthouse with my parents, I decided to check on my fairy house. Do you think she's gonna find anything in her fairy house today? A pair of finches finches were carrying the last berries away in their beaks. Searching for the ground for more berries, I came to a small stream. The sound of the water trickling gave me an idea. I took some stones from my pack that I found near the lighthouse and arranged them in a circle near my fairy house. Then I filled the circle with water from the stream in case the fairies got thirsty or wanted to take a bath. What do you think visit her fairy house? Anybody here? I whispered the next day. At first, the house looked empty. Then I spied someone in the pool. I wanted to get a closer look at the frog as he bathed. Oops, I guess I got too close. As the frog leaped away, I could hear other frogs singing out to him. I started singing myself as I got to work collecting acorns and pine cones. It was time to make some home improvements. Do you guys remember the frogs we saw last week? It kind of looked just like this, didn't it? A little bit. When I came back the next afternoon, I saw a squirrel nibbling on the nuts, but no fairies in sight. I just couldn't give up. I still hoped the fairies would visit my house. Maybe it needed a better entrance. In my pack were seashells and feathers my mom and I had found at the beach. I decorated the path leading up to the door. I thought about adding my shiny bracelet to one of the shells, hoping to catch a fairy's attention. But then I remembered, what was the rules of the woods? No artificial materials. The next morning I got up very early when my parents were still asleep and tiptoed out of our cottage and into the woods. This was the day we would be leaving the island, so I had one last chance to visit with my fairy house. A fog had rolled in off the ocean, covering the woods like a thick blanket. I could barely see. It was like walking in a cloud. The trees seemed huge, and their branches looked like arms reaching out to grab me. Goosebumps started popping out on my arms and legs. Someone was watching me, I was sure. I don't know. Look, here's a raccoon watching her. Owls looking down, watching her. Should I turn around and run? But my fairy house was so close. It was then I heard footsteps and saw a large, dark shape moving towards my fairy house. My heart started thumping. I jumped behind a tree to hide. What do you think Kristen saw? You want to find out? I caught my breath. It was a deer licking the salty seashells. I stood perfectly still as she made her way lazily through the woods, then vanished into the mist. It was just a deer. Exhausted, I sat down near my fairy house, watching, waiting, and wishing for fairies to appear. The quiet of the woods and the soft mist made me sleepy. My eyelids felt heavy, but I tried not to fall asleep. Before long, the sun started breaking through the mist, and with it came a soft breeze. Do you guys like sleeping in a soft breeze? I love a good breeze, the best sleeping weather ever. Kristen, the breeze seemed to whisper in my ear. Kristen, wake up. We can only stay a moment. Struggling to open my eyes, I saw a bright beam of light and a tiny smiling face. Did she finally get to see fairies? What do you think? We are the fairies who live in the spirits of all the plants and animals in these woods, a voice said. All of the houses here, of all the houses here, the animals have chosen yours to visit. You have treated the woods with care and respect. Look quietly, Kristen, for this is a moment of magic, when the fairies will show themselves as a way of thanking you. She finally got to see the fairies. As the late morning sun started breaking through the mist, light beams illuminated the fairies. They sparkled like jewels. They became so bright, I had to close my eyes. What do you think happened when she closed her eyes? Do you think they disappeared? Do you think they went into her house? I don't know. There was a lot of fairies and her house wasn't that big. Let's find out what happened after she opened her eyes. When I opened my eyes, the fairies had changed into beautiful monarch butterflies. Butterflies fluttered all around me like a great orange cloud, following me to the edge of the woods where the sun shone brightly. They turned into butterflies. Isn't that pretty? I watched them dancing towards the light, higher and higher. Squinting into the warm golden day, I smiled and waved as the last butterfly disappeared into the sky. Look at this little page, this little corner. Let me read it. It's a little small. Let me read it. It says, shh, over here. Turn this page to see some tips for building your own fairy house. Would you guys like to see what this little fairy is trying to tell us? Would you like to know some tips about building your own fairy house? Let me turn the page and see what she's talking about. Haha. The author and illustrator, Tracy Kane, has in the back of her book, How to Get Started with Your Fairy House. Tips and ideas and things you can do. So she also talks about the different seasons, right? And things that you can find in the different seasons. What season are we in right now? Do you guys know? We are in summer still summer. But guess what? Next week we are going to be in what? Autumn or fall. And she has a list of some things over here like dry queen Ansley's, some milkweed pods that you can use that would make cool materials for your fairy house, some dried grasses. But if you and your family want to check this book out or buy this book again or check it out at your library, you can actually read on what she says would be what would be good materials for a fairy house. Stay tuned for activities to go along with fairy houses. Welcome back, friends. So I have a little basket here, a little crate or basket, and I have some natural materials in this basket. They are great materials that would be very useful in a fairy house. So let me see. I'm gonna hold them up and I'm gonna ask you a few questions. I wanna find out how you guys would use them, okay? So right now, first I have some leaves from a magnolia tree. And the reason I chose these leaves is because they're very sturdy. You can take a magic marker, like a Sharpie. You can write on these and decorate them and make them really pretty. Or you can paint them. I've done all those different things with magnolia leaves because they're that sturdy. So, how would you use these magnolia leaves and transform them into your fairy house? Next, I have, this is one of my favorite things to collect here in the garden, especially during the fall time, because they're all over the ground at a secret place here in the garden. I can't tell you where they are, but this is a top of a burr acorn, and see how fuzzy it is. So I have used this before as a hat for a fairy in a fairy house. How would you use this natural loose part? I have some lichen here that I found on the ground. And I've also used lichen in my fairy houses when I think I used it for like ground covering or just decoration. How would you use this? You can see it's really colorful on that side, and then you turn it over, it's brown. I also have a rock. So this side is pretty flat, this side has a little lump on it. How would you use it? I also have some more tree bark, a little piece of tree bark. Tree bark is great for fairy houses. You can see it looks one way on the inside and another way on the outside. How would you use this tree bark? And in the story, the author Tracy Kane actually talks about using this. This is a milkweed seed pod. And look at the cool little fluff on the outside. I'm gonna blow it. Let's see what happens if I blow. When I blow the seed, the fluff with the little seeds on it. Kind of looks like fairies, doesn't it? Isn't that cool? I'm gonna do it again. Kind of looks like a fairy. I have in here a bunch of the fluff that I found on the ground inside our garden, the children's garden. And if you stick it in here, that could be a cool fairy bed. Would you like to see me blow all of this fluff? So when I blow the fluff and it lands, what do you think is gonna happen? Guess what? Those seeds are probably gonna land somewhere, and more milkweed is probably gonna grow in that spot. But I'm not gonna talk a whole lot about milkweed because my friend Kelsey has done a check-in that has activities that go along with our story, and she talks all about this milkweed plant and some monarch caterpillars and butterflies. Be sure to check her out, okay? The wind's gonna do it for us. The wind's gonna do it for us. Is the wind gonna do it? The wind's doing it for us. Off it goes. We are over here near our fairy village that's on our tree trail right here in the children's garden. So I am going to point to a very cool fairy house. And I'm going to use my little fairy wand stick that I made. And if you want to know how to make one of these, check out the resources that's along with this story time. And you'll see that I attached a link to how to make one of these. So I'm going to use my fairy wand to point. Take a look at this fairy house. What kind of things do you see? I see pine cones. I see some seed pods. Look at the rocks. Do you think there's a fairy living inside this fairy house? I don't know, but it's really cool. And take a look at the acorns. Remember I told you it was my favorite acorn? Lots of burr acorns on top of there. That's really cool, isn't it? Very creative. I'm gonna knock on the door. Should I knock on the door, see if someone's in there? No one answered. I guess they're sleeping. Or maybe they were checking us out and looking at us. I don't know. Shall we look at another fairy house? Come on, let's look at another This one kind of reminds me of the one from the story. Guys, check this one out. It has some seashells in there, some rocks. Can't get to that door. We'll knock on it, but we can't get to that door. Do you see any fairies in the window looking out at us, maybe? No. Would you like to see another one? Walk with me. Look at this one. What shapes do you see on this one, guys? I spy with my little eye a triangle. Do you guys see the triangle? I see it. It's right here. It's the window. I also spy with my little eye a circle. Do you guys see the circle? Do you see the circle? Right here. Right there. Should I knock on the door? I'm not going to do this one. Nope. But I do see an ant. There's some ants visiting this fairy house. I don't know. No one answered. If you all would like to see the rest of the fairy houses, because there's some more that we didn't show you, and you can also get to take a closer look at them, come on and visit. They'll be here waiting for you, right here on the tree trail at Ginter Botanical Garden. I hope you guys enjoyed story time today. I did, and so did my friend Beth. We had fun with the fairy houses. Which fairy house do you like the most? I can't decide. I like them all. Again, if you want to see the fairy houses, come visit us. They're right here on the tree trail. And remember the rules of the woods if you want to go outside and collect some natural materials, right? So let's go over the rules one more time. You may build houses small and hidden for the fairies. Please do not use living or artificial materials. Okay? So when you're out picking, try not to pick like off of a tree or as if something is attached. If you want to pick up leaves that's already fallen, that is great. Or nuts that you might see on the ground or rocks. Be respectful to the woods and see you next week.